Folks Working for Yourself podcast. We are powered by trusted creators, and this episode is going to be talking around upgrades, computers, a few different topics that we're covering, and we're going to see if it's worth reviving one of the old computers. I've done something similar today, so I've set up a second studio with the computer that I live stream onto TikTok with. Reddit Live used to be a great place. I used to live stream, but because that stopped, I've had to find an alternative, and I found a great and co-host. Basically, we've done 2 episodes now, so it seems to be a regular occurrence. So it's nice of him coming on today. We're going to be talking about computers. We're going to talk about upgrades. So hello, how are you doing today?
Good. Thanks again for bringing me on. Happy to be here.
It's been great. I think the last time we spoke in the previous episode, I found that we naturally had some good conversation about computers, tech upgrades, things like that. I know there's additional things that you work on, but I'm concentrating on that area with yourself. And we can look at things around how to keep old computers still working. Because I remember the last time we spoke, you mentioned, let's buy computers, even if they're old, buy good ones that were at the time good computers, like a little bit more luxurious, as you would say, so better built and more workstations, and they tend to last you longer. So I used that type of mentality. I did buy another computer, Dell Precision T1900, which is like a fairly old computer in the grand scheme of things, but it's worked out quite nicely for me. So I wanted to talk today a little bit about maybe some anecdotes from yourself in terms of your tech support days. If you've got any stories that you can share about maybe computers, how they come into play, things to keep an eye out for, and we'll scatter a few additional benefits for today's listeners around how we can revive old computers, things to upgrade, what's worth upgrading, what's maybe worth not spending as much money on. And obviously this is going to be our opinion, so we're just going to share this today. Does that sound like a good plan?
Absolutely, yeah. I think after the conversation, we did go a little bit into that, where you were, I'm recalling now as you were saying, like, we were having that conversation. I was like, oh, I want to be able to do this. And I tossed out some suggestions to you. I'm glad to see that you actually took that and made something of it. Yeah, it's great to revive these old workstation machines because, yeah, like you mentioned, it's premium quality stuff at the time. It was not the best thing because there's always something more expensive, but something that somebody paid a good chunk of money for. And even though it's a little older, it's still going to perform pretty well.
Yeah, that's true. Because what happened was we make sure to go back. If you're listening today, one of the episodes, I'll put in the show notes so you can hear the full episode we spoke about. We basically had a conversation around computers, and I mentioned about live streaming, and I was using a laptop, and I got some great suggestions. So I thought, you know what? Because he's been in that field for a while, it's worth me picking up and seeing if I can make something of this. I'm just going through my settings now so I can give you the breakdown of what this computer actually is. So this is a Intel Core i7 is a 4th gen, so 4770, 3.4 gigahertz, which is not bad. That's like a decent processor, 3.4 gigahertz, even in today's day. And I've got multiple cores there. I upgraded the RAM, so we've got RAM of 16 gigabyte, which seems to be okay. 8 is like a minimum, but I've just doubled it to 16 because obviously we do live streaming and video. And I put an SSD drive in there, and I've got Windows 10. And you'll be surprised what I can do with this. Should I tell you what I do with it?
For sure.
So I do live streaming on TikTok. So if you get 1,000 followers on TikTok, they allow you to live stream to an audience. And that actually hogs your resources. You can't use OBS at the moment. You have to download like a program which has TikTok's own dashboard in it. So I live streamed on my laptop, and it just absolutely went 100% CPU usage. So I think it was using everything I had. So I thought, okay, let's try it on this computer. And it did the same thing. But then I upgraded my graphics card. So I got a 4 gigabyte graphics card. Radeon, so it's not like a fancy one, but just a standard 4 gig AMD Radeon card. I think I paid $120.
That's solid. I love the spec sheet that you went down. If you look at a good test of to see what people are using is the Steam survey. So the platform Steam, where you play your PC video games.
Yes.
They every month they take all the data of all their users. I don't know how many millions of people that they have. And I think the last one that I saw was December. So you're like running down pretty much. I have processor that's running at I think it's like between 2.8, 3.5 gigahertz in speed. 16 gigs of RAM is the most popular setup right now. 1080p monitor, Windows 10, and that's like overwhelmingly what people are using. And I think for video cards, it's the specific model, the GTX 1650 is the most popular one. Now that Radeon one that you have there it's sort of like entry level, but it can certainly hold its own. Like it's always good to have a dedicated graphics, and I'm sure people that know about this will know. If you have integrated graphics that come in the CPU, you don't need a GPU, but it really bottlenecks your performance. Once you move that processing need over to a dedicated part, which is the graphics card, then you have the CPU is free to do more, because you offload that task to it, and it's done much better because those cards are designed for that, for sure.
Yeah, that was the main thing I found, because when I had this computer actually has its own built-in graphics card as well.
Sure.
So it had a HD graphics 4600, which is about 2 gigabytes. So the computer itself, even though it's an old computer, I've got 2 gigabytes of graphics built onto the computer's motherboard and the 3.4. It was doing all right. But what I did was I'm live streaming on OBS. That's going out at 1080p to Restream, which is basically going out to LinkedIn, Facebook, and about 10 different places. And then I've got a second OBS recording, which is in a horizontal format. And then I've got the TikTok as well. So that's like a lot of stuff all happening on this desktop. So if I give you the percentage now, I'm not streaming on TikTok, but just having 2 OBS sessions and this session with you, my CPU has 74% used. Memory is about 6% used. So there's loads of room there for memory. And the graphics card, the Radeon, is 71% used. And then it's also using the GPU on the computer at 18%. So I'm like, whoa, that's using a lot of... But then I'm streaming in, you could say, 4 different places. So I'm recording at the same time as well.
Yes. So what's happening there is that not only are you receiving this video information, and you have the computer processing all of that, it's also doing encoding. So it's taking that raw data and encoding it for these platforms to be able to stream out. It's compressing it so it's efficient, because you're not beaming out the pixel for pixel stuff that you're recording. So that's all that process that's happening back there. And this older machine that you've taken and refurbished pretty much is handling its own. Now the big difference, because you mentioned you were doing this on a laptop, the laptops are way more power efficient, and so you can look at a spec sheet of a laptop and a desktop, and it'll look similar, but once you actually see the performance, it's going to be a world of difference, because there's just a lot more power in the desktop. And that, of course, is speaking to the form factor, because laptops, they're much smaller, they don't have as much a cooling solution. A desktop has more space, you can have a bigger heat sink, you can have more power. And so you can see the big difference. Like when people, I feel like it's a bit disingenuous of like graphics cards manufacturers to sort of give the same model name just to like graphics cards on the desktop versus on the laptop, because the laptop one is, on average, you're looking at like 20-30% less performance. But that's they technically get away with it because it's the same architecture. But anywho, I'm getting off on a tangent there.
No, I think it's a valid point, because a lot of questions that you get is, when I was looking online, you get a CPU on a computer, for example, if it's 3.5 gigahertz, and a lot of people will ask, wait a minute, I've got a laptop which also has 3.5 gigahertz, but why am I not able to play this game there, but I am there? So I'm glad you mentioned that, because the power, and also if something gets warmer, it's not going to work as well. So for example, in a laptop, it's not as much circulation, so it gets hotter and then it starts dipping down the performance.
Absolutely.
Whereas like you mentioned with the desktop, you've got a little bit more room, you've got a bigger fan, it can actually get rid of that heat, and then it can perform more optimum. So that's really good.
Oh yeah, for sure. And normal people aren't going to get into this story. So this is for us tech nerds, we're looking at, if you look at heat differences in between the laptops and the laptops will run, if you got high-end stuff, anything with like an i7 or something on a laptop, it'll easily run 90 Celsius when it's actually being taxed, versus on a desktop at maybe 65 if you have good cooling solution, or if you're running like an all-in-one liquid or something like that. So it is a huge difference. And this is all marketing, right? Because they'll say, oh, it's at this speed, but what the laptop says, they can boost to that speed until they hit this thermal threshold, and then they need to pull back. So on average, they're actually running a lot slower.
I've just checked my graphics card at the moment. It's running at 40 degrees, and I'm opening up core temp just to see what my main computer temperature is running at. Because you're right, it's good to check this out. And I reckon you mentioned it can be a little bit geeky, but I think it's somewhere that people need to go. So if you're listening to this today and you're thinking, wait a minute, is my computer performing as well as it needs to? These little tips would be quite useful for you, because you can do these little checks at home. So maybe download a little meter that tells you what your temperatures are running at, and that lets you know, okay, if it's running warm, what can I do? Have I got my desktop in a place that is not able to circulate air? Because sometimes people put them in like cabinets or desks and then it's not getting circulation. So you might not need to upgrade. What you might just need to do is what I've done. I've moved my desktop to the side of my desk so it's got a nice channel of air from the door and it gets circulation. So these little things will save you money, because you won't have to go and get a tech expert to say, actually, you know what, it's not your computer, it's just getting warm because your fan needs upgrading or something silly like that, so you don't have to spend money. But sometimes I have noticed, this is getting even more technical, but if you've got an older computer, if you're quite tech savvy and you can open up the computer and you know what you're doing, you can actually take the processor off and check the thermal paste to make sure that there's good fresh thermal paste, because after a few years it gets crusty. So I did do that on my desktop, which is this old computer, and I took it apart, upgraded the RAM, put in a graphics card, took off the processor, got some thermal paste, which is basically like a layer of lubrication between the processor and the motherboard, so it can easily transfer I don't know what the word is, but
transfer heat.
Yeah, that's it, transfer the heat. So this is getting a little bit technical. However, if you're looking to save a bit of money, if you're quite tech savvy, you can do these little things yourself just to improve and maybe give older technology a little bit more life, so you can get a few more years out of it. Have you had much experience with that side of stuff, or have you been more software orientated yourself?
No, it's mainly hardware, because that's what I've enjoyed. It's always been just pulling things apart and putting them back together. And what's super fun for me is getting a budget and like really optimizing it, getting the best bang for your buck. I've seen like shows on YouTube and whatnot where somebody will do a challenge, like we've got $400, for example, 2 teams, who can build the best computer with this. So they're running around looking in secondhand markets and just like finding whatever parts they can and putting it together. And at the end of the day, they'll see, okay, we're going to throw these games at it. Let's see who gets the most frames out of it. What sort of performance do you get when I'm doing editing or stuff like that? And that's fun to watch. And I've done that in my life, because coming not from the wealthiest place, just growing up with friends, we'd have to like throw stuff together to get the game to work. I remember when this was massive MMO game, massively multiplayer online game, Final Fantasy 11. That's like early noughts that came out, and we all had laptops and stuff, and you have to find ways and little tricks to like tweak it and optimize it to get this thing to run, or have an old computer that we can put together and then try to find another piece, or try to find the RAM or a graphics card for it, and see like, okay, can we get this to run on this? And that's always been immensely fun for me throughout my life.
Yeah, I think because when we work through this process, nobody really wants to spend more money than they need to. So sometimes it is good to find a nice selection of things that you can maybe upgrade and work through. And I've seen a few, I think Linus Tech Tips normally does this kind of thing now and again as well, when he does like a budget setup. And it's surprising what you can do with some of these old computers.
For sure, yeah. It's weird, because what you do is sometimes the way it goes is you spend so much more money, and you're only getting a certain percentile of like, well, I'm spending 50% more money, but I'm really only getting 20% more performance, and that's just sort of the nature of it. But so it's about, for me, it's always been about finding that sweet spot of like, okay, I'm spending this much, I'm not getting that top performance, I'm getting close to it, but I'm saving so much more money, and it's a little puzzle that I like to put together, pretty much.
And just while you've been speaking, I've downloaded the core temp. I've got 4 cores and 8 threads. So it's 4 actual processor cores, but then they make like a digital version which doubles them up, so you get 8 threads. If you're listening to that, that's like a layman's explanation. There's probably more detail in there, but just an overview. Now these temperatures, they're a bit high, but not too bad. So my cores overall about 67 degrees.
I'd say that's actually pretty good. That's a good temperature. If you're just doing air cooling, that's pretty normal, and that's good. Especially since you're saying the CPU is probably at around 60, 70.
Yeah, 72%.
Yeah,
of
that's
the CPU.
perfectly fine. Yeah.
And before it was a bit higher because it was doing more work. But now that I've got the graphics card, it seems like it's doing better because the graphics card is 70%. And then my CPU is about 70. And plus the graphics card has a little fan on there as well. So that improves a little bit more of the circulation.
So yeah, those chips on those graphics cards are usually pretty large, and they do generate a lot of heat. So the cooling on them is pretty robust. So they'll have those 2 fans, and the heat sinks, which are like gas chambers pretty much inside of these copper pipes to transmit the heat around. And they're pretty good. But no, those are perfectly fine temperatures. These things can operate, in all honesty, I believe thermal threshold for Intel usually is around almost 100 Celsius. Of course, you don't want to have your CPU running at that temp, because what you do is that you're degrading its lifetime pretty much. So if you keep the delta between your coldest temps and your warmest temps to a minimum, that's how you extend the life of the silicone pretty much.
And if you're listening today and you're not too sure what we were talking about there, it's basically a little program that you can download free off the internet. It's called Core Temp, and it lets you just have a look at what the computer is running at in terms of the heat and how much it's putting out. So you can actually check that. I'll put a link in the show notes so you can download that and check that out for yourself. It works on most computers, so it just gives you an idea of what temperatures you're running at, and if you need that, it can help you out. Coming back to this a little bit, there's a lot of talk now recently, especially when you mention the gaming computers, the water cooling aspect of it. Do you reckon it's worth the headache, like getting all that rig set up?
So if you're doing an all-in-one where everything it's a closed loop, everything is put together, it is pretty straightforward to put together. Sometimes even easier, depending on the chip that you have and what you call a socket type and how you're putting that into the machine. As far as performance goes, I think the biggest difference between that and air cooling is that the water cooling, because you can get air coolers that are just as good as water cooling, because it's all the same thing pretty much. At the end of the day, it's just air being pushed through, either just through the heatsink or through a radiator with an all-in-one. But I think it's with the water, it's the delta between the high and the low temperatures is a little narrower. So, and there's another factoid that I'm sort of missing, but you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and skip that. Yeah, it is totally fine. It depends. It honestly depends. A lot of it now at this point is aesthetics, really. Because if you want to have a nice clean case, right? You don't want to have a lot of stuff in the way. You can get that all-in-one cooler because it's just the mount on the CPU, and then you have the radiator off to the side or the top or wherever you want to mount it. And you have this sort of clean build, and a lot of airflow can go through it. Not that it would make a huge difference if you had the fan, but usually if it's a fan, then it pokes out, especially if it's an aftermarket one and it's larger. And then you have the custom water build, and that requires either you're an advanced level or you're paying somebody to do these. They got to measure out these tubes and make sure everything is closed off, and it's pretty involved. But it's it's fun if you're into that sort of thing, and totally worth it. And when you're looking at overclocking, you definitely want to do water cooling to absolutely push it to the limit, because it can definitely dissipate that heat a lot quicker.
Yeah, I think it's important you mentioned there, especially about aesthetics. So a lot of the times, it depends how good you want the computer to look. Because some of these little upgrades, like the RGB, having the nice fan, having the pipes coming into it, having some of the graphics cards with displays on. Have you seen those little round displays?
Absolutely. People turning their computers into art pieces, for sure.
So there's loads of thoughts around this, and if you're spending money, then you have got the option there, especially if you're doing gaming and your computer's going to be in your shot. If you're live streaming, that might be a benefit for you. But there's different ways of looking at this. Like, for example, my computer doesn't look very pleasing, but it gets the job done. So you're going to weigh up what you want to do. Because if you look at my machine, it's basically like an old workstation from a computer. Like it's still okay. It's not that bad. It looks like a nice Dell computer, but you wouldn't say, you know, that's a gaming PC. But you can play games on it.
Sure. But it's a matter of preference too. And that within itself too, that whole thing of like, oh, this is just a workstation. There's a whole sort of subculture of that where you have what they call sleeper machines. And people will take a chassis from computers back in the 90s, you know, these beige, weird looking monstrosities, but inside of it, it's a whole modern software. You just can't see it. So it's sort of like somebody pulling up with a Honda Civic, but they've put in a Corvette engine inside of it pretty much.
Yeah, I think there's loads of little, especially on Reddit, you see loads of like groups where they do that. Like, for example, old ThinkPad computers as well, laptops, they've been messing about with those to make them even better. So bringing this back a little bit, we talked quite a little bit there about more specified like specs and things, which if you're not familiar with, you can check out YouTube and you'll see similar videos to what we're talking about. You can actually spend hours seeing all these setups. But some of the base things I wanted to speak about today around your computer, there's a few basic things that you can do that will actually improve it. So we spoke already about temperature, making sure it's in the right location to get good flow. Something that you might not have done is, if you're listening today, have you ever opened up your computer and hoovered out the dust? Because if you have a computer, oh my God, when I had a computer about 2 years later, I opened it up to put a graphics card in. And there's just dust everywhere. Because it's got fans, it actually sucks in and there's dust everywhere. So there's probably a proper way of doing this, but I used a vacuum cleaner with a long extension and basically made sure the computer was off and went through and cleaned off all of those areas, which basically improved the circulation and got rid of all those little bits. Because over time, if those get into your CPU, they act as like a bit of sandpaper and they work through making everything a bit messy. Is that something you've had experience with there?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, of course, cleaning out dust bunnies and stuff like that. If you're living a home with a carpet, that's a huge thing. And you have your tower just sitting on the floor, because obviously all dust falls down. So it's going to be down there. So elevating your computer is always a good thing. If you don't have it on your desk, you can have it just on something that's, just above the floor. The whole thing about, what you're speaking there, things getting caked in there. What you want to usually do is blow it out, not try to suck, inhale it, pretty much. So that's why you see people with the air blower cans or something. Or the best thing to do is to get you have sort of these just blowing machines, pretty much, right? Because there's little crevices and things within the fans themselves, the bearings that you have there. You have the heat sinks that cool the processor. There's usually small areas in there that dust accumulates, and that's where the heat gets dissipated. So you want to blow the dust out of there. But if you've got a decent case, especially a more modern computer case, most of these things do come with sort of mesh.
Yeah, pre-filters, like an extra
filters,
foam.
Exactly. Mesh filters that. So for the most part, every now and then you can just take the filter out and clean that up, and you're good to go. For older machines, you got to pay a little more attention to those.
Yeah, I think these are little things that kind of help out just to keep an eye out. And there's a great point there about using a compressed air can as opposed to what I did. So don't do as I do as I say if you're listening to this today.
I mean, it's fine. You can get that dust out that way too, but usually you want to sort of get good pressure compressed out, and that way it can blow out any dust that are stuck in these sort of small areas.
And a few other things to think about, especially if it's an older computer. Something really basic like swapping out the hard drive for SSD drive will be amazing. So this desktop computer had a 500 gigabyte hard drive. So that's like it has a physical disk in there and it moves. So it's like an old school type of disk.
Magnetic plates, yeah.
Yeah, so now upgraded to SSD. My computer boots up in literally like 25-30 seconds. I'm like, oh wow, that's made a massive difference. So if you're at these early stages, it's worth investing in this. And SSD drives have gone quite low in price now. You can pick up a 250 gigabyte for cheaper than a hard drive.
It is a great time to buy hard drives right now. That's probably the one computer component that's pretty easy and they're great quality to pick up right now for sure.
And one of the things I was worried about here was I thought I'm going to get a desktop, but can I upgrade it? As in, did it have an extra slot? 'Cause sometimes desktop computers don't have PCI slots where you can put extra graphics cards in or extra USB cards so that you can have extra USBs in the back. So when you're buying the computer, just do a quick search online to see your model number and see if there's options there for upgrades. And also, things like this graphics card, the reason I got this cheaper 4 gig graphics card is because it doesn't need extra power. So you can't get a really old computer and then put like an 8 GB graphics card in there without upgrading your power supply. So there's a few additional technical things that you need to think about. Go to the limits of your computer. But if you need to go to extra limits, you will need to check, actually, you know what, do I need to change my power supply? Because this computer came with a 375 watt power supply. And most higher graphics cards need at least 400, 500. And there's a little bit of maths around there, as in how many things have you got in your computer, what's drawing how much power. You do a little bit of adding up, so you can check out if you can use that. And I found that the card you mentioned, the NVIDIA 1050S, I think it was, or 1060S.
The GTX 1650 is the most popular graphics card right now.
I would have to have another Corsair power supply in order to do that, and that power supply was about £50, and then you spend between that, so you would need to weigh this up. And also, some graphics cards are a bit longer than other graphics cards, so when you're putting it in the actual unit, you need to make sure, have I got enough space for the whole thing to slot in, because some of them are ginormous, they're like really long.
Absolutely. The new 4000 series from NVIDIA and the last AMD ones are just these monstrosities that are the size of, I don't know, what's a good comparison? Like the size of a keyboard, pretty much. Like these huge things, and they're super thick because of the cooling solution that's on them. They're triple fanned, and they take up, when you normally take up 2 slots of your card, these things are going up to 3 and almost 4 slots. Yeah. So it is wild. Those are all great tips to look at, and the power situation, because for the most part, generally, and I'm pretty sure this is for almost all motherboards, those PCI slots, those expansion slots that you're putting in these graphics cards, they can output 75 watts through that. So lower end video cards, you can just slot them in and you don't need any extra power coming from the power supply directly to the card. So that is actually, an excellent thing. Form factor, you'll have cases that are, especially when you're looking at these older machines, they might have been lower profile computers, so they're much smaller, and you can get low profile video cards that'll fit in there. So it's another consideration. Or even if they're full size, again, with the much larger cards and the power draw and all that stuff. If you're doing brand new computers, a PC part picker is always a great site where you can go in and pretty much pick every single component, and it'll give you an estimate. I was like, okay, this motherboard, this CPU, this GPU, these extra hard drives, or these other peripherals will generally, you want this wattage, and it'll flag if you have any incompatibilities and stuff. So it's a great site to get an idea of, like, if you are building a new machine and putting it together yourself, on what the price is going to be, and exactly which components you're going to put together.
We'll put all of these sites in the show notes so you can actually visit these. So as well as the core temperature program I mentioned earlier, I'll put this PC part picker site as well. So if you're listening today, you've got somewhere to go to just do a little bit of research. Also, I think because we've spent years in this kind of arena where we've upgraded over time, we've got built up knowledge, it may be worth letting our listeners know today, sometimes you can upgrade your graphics card for other reasons other than gaming, because you can use your graphics card to make it more better for you. In my example, I don't do much gaming. Mine's is more video creating, live streaming, which also can make use of the graphics card's extra power. So think of it like another mini computer in the computer, because you've got some extra power there. So if you're thinking you're not sure if you need a graphics card, getting a little extra boost from that will actually improve your computer's running capability. Like in my example I mentioned, I got it because I wanted to live stream, and I was able to balance the load out of multiple programs running, as well as video editing. You can use it for encoding and all sorts of things. So keep that in mind, and they're not that bad. I was able to get a 4 GB one for $130, £130 with about $150. So that's reasonable in the grand scheme of things, because you can spend hundreds of pounds and dollars on these types of things.
They're, well, as most people, at least in this area or surrounding this area, would know, how things have been going on with the chip shortage, and it has calmed down quite a bit now, but easily you're going into the thousands of dollars when you're doing that high end stuff, and yeah, using it for video editing and CAD is a huge thing too, as people designing with CAD software, photo editing and gaming. Yeah, the video cards, it's how you mentioned it. It is its own sort of compute unit because it's got a processor. Well, it's got millions of processors, and it's got its own dedicated RAM. So you are offloading a lot of this visual processing over just to it, and that way your CPU is free to do its own thing.
And also something else that you can do with the graphics card is sometimes your computer might only have one output for a monitor. So if you want to use multiple monitors, the graphics card allows you to do that. Because now on this one, I've got a HDMI out lead and I've got 2 DisplayPort out leads. So I could actually plug in 3 monitors and have a 3 monitor setup, which is an extra benefit of having a graphics card. So there's a few different things about this. Weigh up which ones of these are good for your needs and see if it works out for you. And also you can have bigger monitors. So like, for example, a 4K monitor can be plugged into my computer and then I've got everything on a bigger screen. So that graphics card enables you to do that.
Yeah, you can push higher resolutions and higher refresh rates. The multi-monitor setup is always a huge plus for just productivity's sake, because you can do so much more when you have more monitors and it's easier to move around and work and that sort of thing. It's all absolutely about what you need to use it for. And if you're discussing this with somebody that's gonna do this for you, it's always be as descriptive as possible. What programs are you gonna run, or what things you might want to do in the future, and that way they can suggest the appropriate parts for you, and really put something together that's gonna fill your needs.
In addition to this, you can even upgrade things around the computer to make your life a little bit easier. So things like getting wireless keyboards, wireless mouse, you can use the computer in a bit more of a nicer way, so it doesn't have to be as close to you. Because in my example, I do quite a lot of live streaming and podcasting, and having the computer too close to me, I get that noise from the computer, the fan. So I have separate wireless systems, so I can put the computer a bit further away so you don't pick up on the sound. And also little tips like making sure the computer's raised off any hard floors and using like a sound panel underneath it so I can sit on top of that so it doesn't vibrate and cause any noises. Because if you have a standard computer, you have your normal power supply fan, but as soon as you put a graphics card in, you've got another fan, so you've got like nearly double the noise that you would have had before. So these are little things to keep an eye out on and see if those help out as well.
They can certainly get very loud, and those fans, they're very whiny, especially the smaller they get and the higher they spin. It can certainly, that's why laptop ones like they try to set those sort of what the fan curves and try to be less aggressive, but once they heat up, they really got to perk up, and it sounds like a little airplane is about to leave your desk. So yeah, it could be quite annoying. For sure. That
was one of the main reasons I got rid of the laptop, because I used to have it on the desk, and because it was working at 100%, everything was just louder. And I was like, oh my God, that's just intense. It's like you say, like a jumbo jet taking off next year.
Absolutely. That's cool though. Now you were mentioning about TikTok streaming and sort of an alternative for RPAN that went away from Reddit.
Yes.
How many have you been doing it regularly, or was it a few times?
Yeah, I've kind of gone similar to what I used to do on Reddit. So on Reddit, I used to live stream maybe at least 3 or 4 times a week. So whenever I had any videos that I needed to make, I was like, you know what, I'll just live stream at the same time. And it was just having that extra integration, because you have people dropping in. It's a bit more like, oh yeah, there's something going on, as opposed to us just being here talking to ourselves. I've been live streaming. If you go trusted creators on search, and you'll find TikTok, you'll be able to see some of the live streams. It's basically a session that you can do. There is a requirement, so you have to have at least 1,000 followers in order to be able to.
I have all that set up. So I actually wanted to mention this earlier, because you're like, oh, it's the live streaming program that is OBS. That TikTok, it took that and it reskinned it, and it added its own functionality. So it is OBS, and it's built off of OBS. That streaming thing they have.
When it runs, when I run OBS and put out video, that would probably use 20% of my CPU. But as soon as I ran their version of the program, it just went to 80% straight away. I was like, is it doing something else that I'm not aware of? Is it encoding in a separate format?
I'm not sure. I'm gonna guess it's probably not as optimized as.
Yeah.
And then you have, because it's got like this weird skin, and it depends on what sort of encoding do they take on their platform, and maybe it's just a little more robust. They also have a bunch of add-ons on there. I don't know if you noticed that like you can add goals and stuff, and that's built into that. So those things might be also kind of sitting in the background running, even though you're not utilizing them. So that might give you, where OBS is sort of a scaffolding. There's not much, because you can have OBS and that's bare bones, or you can go with like Streamlabs. It's a little more user friendly, but it does, again, it would probably be the same result, where that one's using a little more processing power because it's got the scaffolding of OBS and then all these other things sort of tacked on.
Yeah, so the reason I started that channel was it's the company channel, and I've started streaming on there about some of the things that I've been doing. But I've quickly found that, if you get the right followers, I had to, on the podcast, Working for Yourself podcast, you can go back to season 12, episode 6, where we talked about using advertising. So we had a budget of advertising, which I used on TikTok to see if does TikTok advertising actually work. So I think you spent like it's about $250, £190, just to see what would happen. So I put 3 videos up and I put promote on each of those videos. They got 45,000 views on one, 26,000 on another, and something else on another one, 3 of them. But the main reason I did that promotion was to reach the goal of the followers. So I discovered quickly that it got the followers it wanted. However, if you're thinking of using TikTok for business, just be careful with what audience demographic you want, because I found when people followed, you can see the age groups, they all were on the lower end. So obviously kids like to use it a little bit more. When I say kids, I'm talking 13 to like 18, because they do more of like dancing and that kind of stuff. So it's probably not the key audience that I would be talking to, because we talk more about working for yourself and like making a career. But maybe I thought it might be good, because if someone at that age is thinking about this, they'll hear us talk about it at an early age, and they'll have a head start because they'll know a lot more about how to get into business and things. So I quickly rephrased it, because now we talk about like technology, and I do a lot of unboxings on there and fun challenges and things. So it's a bit of a break, and I do it more for the fun side of it, like we used to do on Reddit, as opposed to like making it a business. So it's more of the fun side of things. So we talk a little bit about stuff, as well as I put some of the shorts up from the interviews. When I do podcast, I put little shorts up, or we talked about this interesting segment, and TikTok users can hear it. So I think we need to compare the views, because you get loads of views. However, the quality of the views aren't as good as, say, for example, Instagram or Facebook. So I've done TikTok ads, I've done Facebook ads, I've done YouTube ads. I'm currently working on LinkedIn ads. It's like an experiment that we're running to see what does well, what doesn't well. Same advert across multiple platforms, and it's a bit of a series that we've made on the podcast. So if you listen along, you can see how I'm doing each month. I kind of let you know, okay, so this is how many views I've had, this is the followers I've got, this is what I find worked well, this is what I find didn't work well. So if you're thinking about advertising, then it kind of helps you on that journey, especially if you're a new business, because a lot of people will say, yeah, just advertise on Google. But you know what? It may not be the best place for you to do that. So we don't want you to waste any money, because budgets are tight. So I'd rather test that and let you know, if you're listening today, where you would be more maybe sensible to spend money if you're looking at maybe getting a return on your funds.
Well, folks that are in that field, I'm sure they would know too. Each platform has their strong demographics, and so you target for that. And TikTok absolutely skews a lot younger. I mean, I'm sure you can, because those tools, I've never done any sort of advertising, because I mean, why would I don't have a company like that. But it'd be interesting to see how granular you can get with, or how targeted you can. I'm pretty targeted, because they're and it's just there's a lot of contention with pretty much any of these social media platforms and how much information they're pulling from you. So I've heard people talking like you can specify down to whatever, pretty narrow age range, location, even possible like job that this person might have, and just just really pinpoint that. But
Yeah,
that's it's a lot of fun though. What outside of that, it is a lot of fun to stream on there, and it is because there's just so many people on that platform. It can be pretty organic and like something crazy can come out of it. Even and you can think of like, oh, maybe it's not the demographic, but who knows? Honestly, if just something the way that everything spreads and the virality of things, like you can never tell what might happen. So yeah, you can always take a risk, but if you want to get in there and look at all the information and pinpoint exactly what are the people that you want to reach, you can most certainly do that.
Yeah, to give you a little preview of that episode and the breakdown, I've got my notes here. So on the TikTok, we did 3 separate ads. The first one was over 2 days. I spent £38 and I let TikTok decide. So there's a box there you can tick to say, let us decide to get you what you want. You can either get more views, you can get more followers, or you can get more engagement. So I ticked, I want followers. And on that £38, which is about $50-ish, they got me 14,000 views. But my aim there wasn't the views, it was the followers. I got 168 followers, which is about 27 cents per follower. But then what I did do on the second advert was I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to hone this down. Like you mentioned, I went into the stats and I said, I want only people between this work age range, this demographic, this type of arena, either working for themselves, leaving college in that kind of area. But then you'll see it massively dropped. I thought, okay, I spent about $50. Let me double that amount. I did $100 the next time. I did that over 1 day. I thought I'll double the followers, but actually I only got 45 followers, even though I spent double. And that was because there's not as many of those people that I wanted to target, and they cost me more to get those. So that was about $2 per follower. So it's very interesting. Yeah, so I did a few different versions of that just to see, give them like a bit of a chance. But it was interesting because now when I live stream, when I get audience comments and things, I can understand where not good, but where the slightly more targeted audience is talking to me, whereas where the younger audience is talking to me, because they'll ask different questions. So when I'm talking about a product, oh yeah, when you bought that, where did you buy that from? How much was it? So more like adult type conversation, you could say, which children wouldn't normally have. They'll be just like, oh yeah, that looks really, really amazing, for example. So it was really good. And we broke that down over 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 days worth of testing. And overall, I spent $378 in total on that. And I think what we achieved was okay. However, if that budget was used elsewhere, maybe it would have been better, especially for what we were trying to do. But it gave us the education part of it. So I was like, okay, now I know this is what TikTok is about. And I've had a few guests on the podcast, like marketing professionals who speak about this similar kind of arena. So if you listen back to Is the M Word, What is the M Word? That's one of our episodes. We did the marketing basically. And we broke down how this was. And we had a few guests on where we spoke about that. Let me just check the episode number.
Really? And I just want to mention that is a fascinating sort of way because it's letting you choose. You want more followers or more views. That means that they've parsed it out and seen like this cluster of people is more inclined to follow you, or you have this cluster of people that are more inclined to maybe watch a video more than once. That is just an insane amount of just knowledge and breakdown, and that just blows my mind. I didn't even consider that. Like they're telling you, hey, do you want more followers? And they'll push that towards these users are more that tend to do that more. That's
Yeah, because as I narrowed down to more of what I wanted, it quickly just fell. So we spent more money over longer days and we just got less and less followers because then we were honing down what we actually want. However, the good thing there was the followers that we got were definitely the demographic we wanted, because you may already know with TikTok, it's very tin hat the way they kind of monitor people and get the information. So there's been known to a few people on YouTube mention that they will actually turn on microphones of phones and cameras to see how the person is reacting to the video they're watching on TikTok. So they're able to put you into different pots, what type of videos you're watching, and then putting those demographics onto different customers. So someone did some research. This is a YouTube video I watched. They did research where they created bots and went onto TikToks, and one bot had a purposeful attitude of being very ethical, One had very aggressive, one had a separate, like being very happy. And they found that the algorithm was able to work out what type of person that was, even though it wasn't a person, it was a fake robot. So that's how enhanced their TikTok algorithms are. They're like saying that's one of the intense ones. So that quickly showed that they showed the people what they wanted to watch, but then they were bucketing that type of customer into, okay, this person does this. He watched this video, so most likely he's got a dog or a cat or etc. That kind of thing. And it's very targeted, and they do also say, obviously this company is owned by China, so they want to have all the privacy stuff comes into this as well, which is very interesting.
Sure. It's completely banned. No government employees can have TikTok on their devices. They've looking at all the other social media companies, and this is why like YouTube and Instagram and everybody is trying to be like TikTok, because that algorithm that they have, they've nailed it. They know exactly what to feed people, so people can just stay glued to their phone. They know exactly what short form videos that you want to see, and it's amazing and terrifying all at once, for sure.
And
I don't have it on my phone.
Yes, and one of the key things is they've got a different version of TikTok for China, and they've got a different version of TikTok for the rest of the world. So in the China version, they've got it limited so people can only watch educational things, and also they're limited at 40 minutes per day. So they can't watch it for longer than that.
Oh yeah, and then also the younger folks, like they have a certain allotted time for like video games and stuff like that too. So yeah,
that's amazing. I think they should have that across the world, because then people won't get stuck in that loophole. But obviously, that won't make them money, will it? So the remainder of the world can be on there for hours and hours and hours. And also, there's a couple of different versions of that. So it's very interesting following that TikTok journey. And like you mentioned, I don't have it on my main phone anymore, just because you never know. So I've got it on a separate iPhone, and I just have Wi-Fi on when I live stream, and then I turn it off. So it's a big thing about, we can be creators on TikTok to share stuff, but as soon as you start consuming it, it just consumes your time. You'll be there for hours and hours.
For sure, yeah.
It's like, it just gives you the stuff you want to see. Like if I like food, people eating food, it'll bring lots of different types of food and like that culinary type of videos, and oh my god, it's another
those little dopamine hits, man. It knows it. Once it nails you down, it knows this is exactly what you want to see, and it keeps you on there. It like my significant other, she had to remove it because she's like, I'm laying on the bed and it's 8 p.m. and next thing I know it's 2 a.m. and I'm still scrolling through these videos. It is wild, yeah.
Yeah, it's very intense. So I think if you listen to this today, you are going to be one of the more careful owners of phones. So try your best to limit it, or you can even get additional apps that like reduce how much you use your phone. So it's like a timer situation. So these would all help, because it's very easy to get into this, I'll call it a hole, because it's a black hole, because you're going to be seeing things you want to see. You think you're learning, but actually, if you put your phone away, you'll think, wait a minute, how many of those videos do I actually remember? Because there's so many of them that come through to you. At the time, it feels like you're learning something, but you don't retain any of that information really, because it's very quick videos. They're like, some of them are 4 or 5 seconds, and they make you laugh, but you're on to the next one and you forgot what the last one was.
For sure. It just washes over you. It's this huge wave of just nothingness. There's mentioning that there's little tricks too. I know on my phone, I have an Android phone, and you can set a schedule to where the device goes into black and white. And I believe I just saw a headline. I didn't actually read the study, but it's something to do with, if there's less color, it's sort of you don't activate as much, and it's not as attention calling. So it's something like, once your phone at 9 o'clock at night, it goes into black and white, you're not as inclined to just sit there and kind of look through it. It's sort of gently telling you, it's like, okay, we're done, and it's weaning you off of wanting to keep going on it the entire night.
That's really interesting, actually, because in that way, you're slowly putting yourself into a mindset. You're not seeing bright colors. It reminds me of the Kindle. You know, the Kindles you can have like as a book. It looks more like a page as opposed to be enticing. So that's a great idea. I'll have to check out what the app is called. I might have that.
And then you have, of course, the thing that's been used for a long time now, where depending of wherever you are, the sun goes down, your phone automatically sort of takes a warmer tone, so it's not as much blue light. That's another one too. I don't know
Yeah, I think
if that was debunked or not. Like, if because people say that if too much blue light, it sort of messes with your circadian rhythm, and you kind of don't want to do too much TV viewing or on the computer before you go to bed, or you
yeah.
want to have maybe an hour or so of stopping looking at screens before you go to sleep because it can disrupt your sleep cycle.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's worth considering these. And Kabir, thanks for your questions over on YouTube Live. He's just watching at the moment and trying to get a free graphics card and a free computer from us. If you go to trustedcreators.org/enter, there's a giveaway of a free microphone. So if you enter your email address there, you might have a chance of winning a microphone. And that's going to be a voucher towards buying a mic. So we have got something running at the moment. Hopefully next time we'll look at graphics cards and see if that's something that we can give away just to keep you going. So definitely check that out on trustedcreators.org/enter. So yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, we just had he was trying to be a cheeky one. He said, give me a computer.
Man, if only we could, for sure. Would happily
Definitely.
oblige. Yeah.
So yeah, I think we've had a nice selection of topics there. Is there any stories that you've got from your tech days that you can share with us around like computers or a funny upgrade or something? Because so I know in your game, especially with support, you have all sorts of like funny anecdotes.
Well,
Being on the spot.
yeah. I'm trying to think of things. Nothing really. I can't think of anything funny or anything like that. I
Or even
remember,
interesting.
Yeah, just getting creative with it, and it goes back to what we were talking about. It just all depends on what the person wants to do with this machine. So I had somebody who had like multiple sort of small businesses, and they had their main office, and they just wanted to set up something where they can easily see sort of a live view of the cameras that were going on. So I put together a computer for them. It didn't need to be anything crazy, but they were gifted by some vendor or something a bunch of these nice big monitors, right? And I'm on the wall. I got these 4 monitors here. It'd be great if I can repurpose these as a sort of like security viewing thing. And he just had a small form factor machine, so I couldn't get like a big graphics card to run individual outputs to these machines. And you have like this there's a specialized sort of like squid connection that you can take one video output and split it up into 4 or 6 depending on what you have. So I was like, okay, we'll get that, and did a few other upgrades and optimized the software, and then he was able to have all 4 monitors up with a multitude of like cameras from each of the stores. So it all just like, just think about what you want to do, and in a practical sense, and also in a sense like, it'd be great if I could do this, but if I can also do this other thing. And you can, if you're so inclined to do the research yourself, feel free to do, or if you know somebody, sit down and talk to them, and they can probably give you good ideas and good avenues to follow down to get to this goal that you want to do. It's great. It's so much fun. Anybody that needs advice for PCs, family and friends, they're always reaching out to me. Oh, here's a funny thing. I have a cousin of mine who's in New York City, and we've known each other for decades now, and ever since we started dealing with like computers and stuff, he's always had me build his machines. In that, and I've moved from New York because I grew up in New York. I've moved from in the South now, and every time he builds a new machine, he doesn't want anybody else to build it but me. So he'll go in and purchase all the parts and ship them to me. He'll have like, we'll do some sort of video call or something, and we'll sit there a few hours as I'm building his computer, and then I got to ship it back. So I'm like, this is just excessive, right? Because you're spending hundreds of dollars in shipping. You can absolutely just go, even get a pre-built, like that's fine. He's like, no, I don't want anybody touching my computer but you. So it's that level of just like trust, and it's sort of like when you get a good mechanic, I guess. You don't want anybody else dealing with you. So yeah, I think that's hilarious that he has me do that. But I got a couple other friends that will be in the same situation. I had my friend from Georgia ship his computer. He was having computer issues. He shipped it down to me. I fixed it up for him and then shipped it back. I'm like, guys, there's other people out there that can do this. You don't need to be shipping these computers all over the U.S.
Yeah, that's interesting, but you're definitely right. I think there's a lot of trust element involved in that because once you find someone really good, you want to stick with them. And also, there was a story on, I think it's one of these websites, it's either Lou Later, the Unbox Therapy guy on YouTube.
Ah, yes, I'm
I,
familiar. Yeah.
I think it's either him or it was Linus Tech Tips, but they did a research, or it might have been PC World. But yeah, they did research where they set up computers, they took them out to their local shop repair people, and they put some software on there to see, do they repair what was repaired, what was needed to be repaired,
Right. Yeah.
and what else have they been doing on it. And they found out in 90% of cases, they were accessing files that they didn't need to access, and they were downloading and saving things onto USB.
Oh my goodness, that's a
there was,
huge
yeah,
no-no there.
that's it. So they
Violation of
find
trust.
that's why I think now people prefer family members or someone who's good in this area that they can build up trust with. Whereas some shops, they mentioned it was the smaller retailers, like the high street retailers that were doing it, but not the bigger people. But they did like a limited research on, I think it was 10 computers or something. So it's interesting about that. So it's always good to find someone that you trust, and then that way you don't mind paying a little bit extra because you know it's going to get done how it needs to be done. And even if they ship it out to you, have you set up your system yet for letting people book you up for consultations or anything? How can someone get information from you if they want to maybe get like either like a one-to-one to speak about it? Because you've shared some amazing tips today, but if one of the listeners today were like, oh, actually, you know what, I want to build a PC, I want to speak to your guest and find out more about what I should do and what parts I should use. So I know you gave me the website there about PC part picker, but if they want like a one-to-one service, are they able to maybe like reach out or book a session with you or something?
I mean, my Twitter's in there. I don't really use it. I've never tweeted, but if somebody wants to shoot me a message, feel free to do so, and we can have a chat for sure. If you need a consultation, we'll call it that. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think it's nice to build it out because you're offering some valuable information, and it'll be nice to reimburse you for some of your time because it's obviously valuable as you work. You want to be able to offer additional services, especially in this digital world now, because everything seems to be online. So having this extra, even a Zoom session with someone while they're building the computer, like a few eyes just looking over their shoulder saying, you know what, you're doing this wrong, maybe check this out, or maybe don't do it this way. So these extra little things are supportive for new setups.
I've never thought of that. Having somebody watch over you as you build the machine. If you're building your first computer and you want like that extra support, that'd be interesting. I keep thinking about too, and it just reminded me of something. And like I mentioned before we started the podcast, that I finally got some work and I'm doing remote work, and it is support work, so I'm pretty happy with that. And I kept thinking, wow, it's strange that we don't have a general IT service sort of like Uber or Lyft, where it's just this application, and it's like, I just need tech support for this general item here, and so you send out a signal, and some IT professional, depending on what prompts you pick, if this is well, my hard drive is failing, or I'm having a networking issue or something like that, and you can just select that and send it out, and you can be like, okay, well, these people are here and they'll charge me this much to do that. I'm amazed that that's not a thing yet.
Yeah, so there's something similar to that, but it's not as good as what you've said. So if you go onto Amazon and you buy a graphics card, you can do an extra tick box, which you can have like an expert install it for you. So you pay, but then with that, a few people have left feedback that it's not as good as what they make out it was. So it makes it look like, oh, you just tick a box, someone turns up, fixes it for you, but that's not what happens. You have to book some extra slots. But I think what you mentioned would be a great option. So if we think around a website where someone goes on and says, okay, I'm installing a graphics card, they tick a box, they pick a slot, they book a session. For example, when you came onto my podcast, I had that form that you filled out to be a guest.
Correct, yeah.
You can have just one of those for yourself, and then people can book a slot, and then they go through a checkout process where, like, for a graphics card is $20, for this advice is $40, or whatever the pricing structure may be, and then you get everything sorted out. The book comes through Zoom, and there you go, you're sorted. So maybe I'll help you set something up if you want.
I think what we're workshopping here, just a very valuable idea for somebody else that might be no, but you would do it in an app. It would have, because that's just everybody's on their phone, right? So it would have to be an app. You'd have to go in there, and it wouldn't need to be you going out anywhere, because it can just be, again, it could be like a quote unquote virtual service call, essentially, right? Like I'm here in my home, I'm having a problem with, I don't know anything about a router, I don't know anything about a modem, I don't know anything about a network switch, but these things are sitting here, right? something's not working. I'm networking issues here. Boom. Somebody contacts you right on the app. It's like, hey, what's up? What's going on? They can access your camera. This is what I'm trying to do here. Oh, okay. These are the steps that you need to take. Now, can you get an escalated service where somebody comes out? For sure, probably, yeah. But you can start with that. Heck, you can have chat, you can have email. So effectively decentralizing tech support.
Yes.
I don't know that. I wish I was a developer, a software developer, because I was absolutely looking to doing that. But unfortunately, I'm not. I'm just sort of a grunt in the IT field, because all I'm doing is dealing with hardware. Of course, Windows and stuff, but mainly hardware.
Yeah, that's interesting. There's a couple of questions here from IT Project over on YouTube from the live stream and Kabir. So we'll come over to that in a second. I'll try and get, I know you give me some specs, so we'll read through those in a second. So I reckon because you've had that idea, that is something that would be, everything starts with an idea, and there's no reason why you can't make it something. You don't have to be a developer.
True. So that is true. Yeah, I can get with somebody and explain the platform and move forward. But I don't know, working full time, it's difficult. I love my free time, Zolf. I love just doing nothing. Yeah.
But hopefully we can find something that you enjoy doing in your free time, so we can still call it free time. Because if you enjoy building PCs, we're like, because like, for example, now we're talking, I wouldn't class this as work, even though it is work technically for me. So we're having a conversation, we're talking about things, and we're finding ideas. So yeah, that would be an amazing idea. Because in that way, you've got trustworthy people giving you real world advice. So not like someone who's there to make money, but more like, I want you to do it the right way and get the best thing, because you might sometimes save money. Because if you consult with someone and you're buying, like, for example, in my case,
for sure,
I would have bought a really expensive PC, but after our conversation, I was like, wait a minute, I've bought a budget PC, I can get done what I need to get done, and I've saved a good couple of $100. So that's like a win-win for everyone.
Yeah. It's if you don't have the budget, but you're going to be more inclined to put a little more effort into it, right, to resolve this issue. So yeah, there's ways to do that. Of course, there's people who'll be like, just I'll just buy whatever it is, sure. But for the majority of people in the world, they don't have all that money, so they need to figure out a way to get the most bang for their buck. And I love that phrase, because that's how mentally that's how I go into when I'm building computers.
Yeah, being a bit more frugal and maybe using something that, because a lot of these chip shortages happened because people wanted to buy new stuff. But if they looked at things that were already there, maybe we wouldn't have got to this situation. So sometimes just rephrasing it.
Well, with the chip shortage, it affected everybody. Even the used market was completely out of control with that. And that was a perfect storm of just insane amount of demand with all the stuff, and people stopping because of restrictions, because of the pandemic, and other industries also wanting more demand. Like the car industry is huge now with silicone and chips and graphics cards, because especially electric vehicles and the way that they operate with these not autonomous functions, but assistant functions, and that uses a lot of computing power, which you need more chips for. And cars in general are just getting smarter with more functions and stuff. And that's, you're essentially driving around with a computer in your car.
Yeah, it's a whole new kettle of fish there, because now we used to be able to repair our own cars, do oil changes, but now that everything's electrical, we'll have to wait for obviously more technicians and more. Oh my God,
for sure.
Okay, so IT Project, hello, I just changed my PC to i5 8600, 16GB RAM, 32,000 MHz, RX 6600 XT, oh nice graphics, 512GB M2 SSD, 4TB hard drive, 650U PSU. That sounds like an amazing setup. What kind of games are you playing on that? Okay, and now I have some old parts, i3 6100, 16GB, and old 2000 megahertz and a 256 SSD SATA and a GTX 1050 Ti. And okay, so is it worth buying a new ATX case and a CPU cooler to make a kind of HTPC connected to TV to use these old parts? Okay, it depends. What are you looking to do? Are you looking to set that up to your TV in order to play stuff on your TV, or for a gaming rig, or more like a server type situation to save files on? So let me know what you're planning to do. That we can probably give you a few ideas. Again,
I'm
we're
going
not
to assume that that's what they meant to do. So and those parts would work perfectly fine for that TCP over IP. So basically, they're they're doing a network access storage, but you can have it on, for example, connected to your TV and have a bunch of movies or whatever shows
Like
there.
a
And
media
since it's
server
on your,
type.
yeah, pretty much like a media
Okay.
server. Since it's on your local network, you can just access those files from your newer rig. I would absolutely go for it. Yeah, the more e-waste we can reduce, for sure. Yeah, give it more life. Give it away to your little cousin or something. Let them tear it apart and maybe learn how to put computers together. You know, growing up, I thought back in the 90s, I thought that everybody would just jump on this bandwagon of tech and computers and things. And I'm like, everybody's going to know about technology and it's going to be fascinating. But looking at the world now, yeah, no, there is still need for people like me, because a lot of people will use these devices day in and day out and have absolutely no idea how they work or how to fix it if something goes wrong. And that's perfectly fine because they're, you know, in their own fields and learning their own things. But it's really cool to, if you can, pass along this stuff. My wife's brother just gave his daughter an old refurbished machine, and like they bought a graphics card, and he had her put it in, and that's always it's always fun to watch, you know.
Yeah, definitely. And also making this additional type of situation, because I recently bought the NAS network attached storage, and I did think about having a whole computer to do that like as a secondary project. So you're right, it's always good to repurpose tech, and then sometimes the things you make are actually better than what you can buy from a shop. Because for example,
Yes.
if I had a computer as a network attached storage and I've got enough bays in there, I could have put more hard drives in there, whereas in a
Absolutely.
NAS you have to buy the 4 or the 5 or whichever version it is, and it's like in its own little unit. So it's worth thinking about that.
Well, it's a give and take, right? Because those NASs they're generally going to be smaller and they're specialized for that, and they're going to have the network controllers on there are going to be optimized for transferring this data. Now, of course, you can do that with a machine, and the machine, yeah, it's bulkier. You got to find space for it, maybe more cables, but you do have a lot more SATA slots. And if you've got an empty PCI slot is there, you can use that as an expansion for more storage. So if you just want like this insane sort of archive of information and data, multiple terabytes, like, yeah, you can probably go that way. You can absolutely get more NAS, but those are going to be pretty pricey. Those will stack up pretty quickly.
Yeah, and also with those, you can actually put extra not graphics, but you can put little cards in there for network upgrades, like from 2 gigahertz to 10 gigahertz, and those can be upgraded in that computer, so you got more speed as you access the files. Whereas my NAS, it's I think 1 gigahertz speed for transferring of files.
Right.
So if I was to get more data, because obviously things are getting more ramped up as we go on year by year, within 5 or 6 years, I'll easily need bigger transfer speeds, because each file will end up being like a terabyte when we've got video and audio and those are 4K footage and etc.
Easily, yeah, for sure. Yeah. Okay, so you're talking about the storage controller and at certain speeds, yeah, for sure. No,
because I've wired it all up, so I use it over the network, so it gives me the fastest speed. But I can imagine at some point I'm going to need more speed because the file's going to be bigger, so you have to wait longer. Is it worth if I already have a PS4 and an Xbox One S?
Well, if it's just for gaming, unless the only reason I would say if it's like maybe some PC exclusive game, which is not with a 1050 Ti. For emulation, if you're doing any sort of emulation, it's you can go use repurpose an old machine and use that for emulation. It's a lot of fun to tinker around with that and have it on your TV and be able to play all these old games.
Got a Raspberry Pi that I've put Retro Pi on, so I play a lot of the old Nintendo go-kart and stuff games on there.
That'd be the only thing that I can think of. But media as well, because you can't really save these media files, although I don't think people are really doing that anymore because it's just too easy to stream it. But back in the day, that used to be a huge thing, like just back up all your shows or your movies and whatnot, and just have them in a hard drive, and they're easily accessible, especially if you set up on the local network and you're able to pull movies from one machine over to the other. But yeah,
And some of the newer routers now, they have USB ports. So you can actually even plug an external hard drive to your router, which acts as a small mini NAS type situation. Not great backup because it's just one drive. But if you've got like files that you share with the house, you can use on that.
yeah, for smaller files, like it is fine because it doesn't have. You're not going to have that transfer speed or anything like a NAS. It's specialized for that.
Okay, now I think we've had a nice little conversation today. It rounds off our topic really about making sure that we can use older devices, getting the best from our computers and looking at what can work well for us. So it's definitely been a great show. Thanks for the live viewers. Hopefully we'll be back with an episode soon around computers and technology. We're always doing live streams about unboxing, so check us out on TikTok at Trusted Creators. I have to say thank you to my guest today, taking the time. I appreciate you coming on. It's been a privilege as always talking to you today.